Good morning. I'm finished with my series on the 2016 World Championship between Magnus Carlsen, the champion, and Sergei Karyakin, the challenger. So now I'm going to look at the World Championship before that, which was the 2014 match between Carlsen, the champion, and Annand, the challenger. Surprisingly enough, Vishy Annand managed to win the candidates after he lost the World Championship to Carlsen and challenge again. Now, in the first match, Anand didn't win any games. There was only Carlsen who won. And yeah, people were wondering if he would put up a better fight in this edition of the World Championship. Well, the first game, Anand played white and Carlsen played the Grunfeld, and Anand played it really well and got a significant advantage, but Carlsen managed to save the draw by repetition. So I think that was already an indication that it would be a tougher prospect this time than it had been first time. So this is game number 2, significantly played on the 9th of November 2014. The World Championship match was played in Sochi, which had been the site the same year for the Winter Olympics. So yeah, I think it was the main exhibition hall, which is where the ice hockey had been played, and the skating and things like that. So yeah, it was an interesting venue. So Carlsen is white, and he plays e4, e5 for Anand. Knight to c f3 to attack the pawn, knight to f6 to defend it, bishop to b5 to threaten the knight. It isn't really, as I have to keep repeating, a threat to win this pawn, because if you take the pawn, then black takes back with the queen's pawn, and then when you take the pawn, the queen can come to d4 where it threatens the knight and the pawn, so you get a pawn back. So it isn't a threat to win the pawn. But it can be, and as soon as this pawn is defended, you're threatening to win this pawn. So, Vishy plays knight to c6, the Berlin defense. He said, well, you want to win my pawn? Great, I'm going to win your pawn, so fine by me. This is known to be a particularly solid defense. In the World Championship match between Vladimir Kramnik and Garry Kasparov, Kramnik managed to take away all advantage from Kasparov in his white games by playing the Berlin defense against his Ruy Lopez. So much so that it was known in some circles as the Berlin Wall. The variation isn't officially called the Berlin Wall, it's just the Berlin defense. It's called the Berlin defense from a tournament in Berlin, maybe at least maybe around 100 years before the Berlin Wall was built. About that. Anyway, so Carlsen plays d3. He likes d3. This was seen in the first World Championship match. I think it was seen in the second World Championship match, or possibly just in the third. Yeah, the bishop comes to c5. Good development, makes sense. White castles. d3 supports the pawn eventually. It isn't a threat anymore. And yeah, he's getting ready to develop his bishop. So Carlsen plays rook c1 and Annand castles. Carlsen takes the bishop on c6. It isn't reckoned to be such a good idea to play the delayed exchange variation. I have a friend, one of the coaches on Chess Boot Camp. I coach on Chess Boot Camp as well as coaching individually, And one of the coaches, the best player amongst the coaches in chess boot camp, Craig, he loves the exchange variation of the Ruy Lopez, because then you go to create a more mobile pawn majority on the king side than black's pawn majority on the queen side. I think I analysed the game where that's the main theme in the World Championship match between Steinitz and Lasker. I think I analysed it in Norwegian a few days ago. But the delayed exchange variation isn't considered as good, and of course you are giving your opponent the bishop pair. So, yeah. But he's no choice, he takes back. Carlsen plays h3. What he's depending on is that this bishop now, if he develops here, he's just biting on granite. Here he's going nowhere. Here it's not such a good square, and he doesn't have any other development squares. So what he's depending on is that he's making this dark squared bishop poor with his play. So, okay, fair enough. Not going to argue with Carlsen. He knows far better than me, and yeah, works out nicely. So the rook comes to the central file. Very sensible play. The knight comes to b2, and the knight comes to d7. It might seem like a bad idea to maneuver to the queen side when you don't know yet where the attack is going to come. His idea is that he is defending the knight here, the bishop here. If the knight comes here, then the knight is defending it, and he doesn't have to end up with tripled pawns. So, but the knight comes to c4, a really good square, and yeah, progress has been made by Carlsen. So Annand plays bishop to b6, and Carlsen plays a4, so he threatens to play a5, take more space, and also trap the bishop. So Annand plays a5, and Carlsen takes on b6. How can this possibly be right? To allow your opponent to straighten out his double pawns and stop the clamp that you have on the light squared bishop. Carlsen understands that this. He takes back. Carlsen understands that this elongated bathtub formation, as James from Epic Cheese calls it, is very difficult for Annand to defend. And so he goes. He's going to open up the centre, and he's going to have that kingside pawn majority, 4 against 3, that will make it difficult for black to use his pawns on the queen side, whereas white can possibly get 4 against 3 on the king side and have a majority. So the queen comes to c7. Fantastic rook left. He's threatening to come here, he's threatening to come here, he's threatening to come here, and he's threatening to come here. All good moves. The knight comes to f8. And so he takes the pawn. And then he's no choice but to take back. He hasn't created a majority on the king side, but he has created a position where he maybe has more flexibility than his opponent. And the knight comes to h5. Obviously, he's looking for the square f5 so that the queen can come to g4 and be attacking. And that old thing's on which Kasparov used to say all the time, knife f5, a knight on f5 according to Kasparov, because of its attacking potential, is worth a pawn. If we look at the analysis, it's certainly going to say that the position is very, very even. But computers are brilliant at defense. They find a way. So the analysis says 0.3 to white. So yeah, nothing. But as Kasparov says, this knight on f5 can be very valuable. So the rook comes to d8 to attack the queen. I don't think that's really a problem for Carlsen, because the queen was going to move. Oh, sorry, clicked on something that popped up just as I clicked. So Carlsen was going to move the queen anyway. He moves the queen to h5, a nice attacking square, and now he's also supporting the moving of the knight on f5 when it gets there. So he comes to f6. Yeah, it does support his pawns, but it is a weakening of his position. And the knight comes to f5, and the bishop comes to f6, and the rook comes to g3. Great, double attack on the g pawn. So the knight comes, and the pawn comes. So Carlsen's threatening to move the knight out of the way and push the pawn. Bishop takes, and he takes with the pawn whilst this pawn is still defended with the queen, and the knight comes to f4. He takes it, and he takes with the pawn, and the rook comes not to f3 to threaten the pawn, to c3 to threaten the other pawn, as if to say, well, I can attack on this side actually, and he can, which forces a weakening of the pawns. This pawn structure is much weaker than it was with them a little bit more together, and he comes to c6. He has several threats now. He can come queen here and win this pawn. He can double up on this pawn. He can surround this pawn. It's difficult to deal with them all. So he deals with one of them first, and the rook comes to c4 to attack the f pawn, so that queen to g4 will be a couple of nasty threats. Queen comes to d7, threatening to play here check. Carlsen gets out of the way of that check and the threats that come with it. So the knight takes up a more defensive situation, and Carlsen doesn't even bother winning the pawn. He just doubles up on the e-file. The rook plays to b7 to prevent the rook from coming to e7. And Carlsen plays rook to e2, and it was at this point in the match that he put on his best Emperor Palpatine voice and said, "Witness the power of my fully functioning Alekhine cannon." He didn't do that. He didn't say that, but that's an Alekhine cannon in the right order, with the queen at the back, on an open file, in an attacking position. You're the world champion. You should be winning this game. So he plays b5 to threaten to break things up. And Carlsen defends it, and he takes the pawn. And now Carlsen, I would, one of the things I really admire most about Carlsen is he isn't the person who just strikes as soon as he's got a chance. When he's got a chance to strike at your position, obviously, e7 is a great, rook e7 is a great move. But Carlsen is the type of player who, instead of doing it directly, puts everything in its best position first. So I would have expected Carlsen here to play rook takes a5 and then come back to e4. Rook takes a4 and then come back to e4 and then play the move. But he didn't do that. He played b takes a4, which actually gives Annand a chance, because he can play here and he can try and create some play with these kingside, queenside pawns. Carlsen attacks the queen anyway, and the queen comes to d6. The queen comes to f3 to defend, attack this pawn once more and be in a better defensive position. He's given up this pawn, but he's not bothered about that. So the rook on e4 is taken, and the queen takes the rook on e4. The pawn comes to f3 check, and he blocks the check, and he tries to make himself an escape square, but to no avail, because the queen comes to g7, threatening this pawn, Can't defend it with the rook there because it gets taken. Can't defend it any other way. If he moves out the way, the rook comes here, check anyway. The king's forced here, the rook comes here, the king's forced here, and the queen comes here, and it's mate. Nothing to do. And Annand resigned, and Carlsen took the lead 1-0. But also, it's exactly 25 years to the day since the fall of the Berlin Wall. And at least figuratively, the Berlin Wall fell again on this day, and this solid defensive weapon for black, which had been so safe in so many World Championship matches, suddenly wasn't safe anymore. Just a really, really good good game by Carlsen with some really counterintuitive things. The late swapping off of the bishop for the knight on c6, taking the bishop on b6 with the knight to repair his opponent's pawns. These things didn't look so sensible, and it isn't his kingside, his more mobile kingside pawns that overwhelm his opponent. It's a kingside attack, which almost Carlsen seems to conjure up out of nowhere. And it wasn't conjured up out of nowhere, it was carefully crafted over a series of very good moves. And so now Carlsen leads 1-0. Yeah, don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe to my videos. Thanks. Bye.